Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Wednesday, November 8th, starting again fairly late. In general, I just woke up late, I guess is the best excuse this time. In accordance with rule changing of Yu-Gi-Oh! OCG, original card game, the following changes have been implemented in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. The above rule changes have been applied to player versus player duels, and for player versus event duels, these changes will be applied by updating the game to its latest versions. Rules about flip summoning a monster and re-summoning a Gemini monster. When flip summoning or re-summoning a Gemini monster, if the summon was negated, the monster will be treated as if it was on the field during the activation of the effect to negate the summon until the activation of the effect succeeds. This is very much in the weeds as far as one specific rule. Rules that effects that are applied and activated each time a condition is met. If the conditions of an effect that applied or activated each time, such as that of Kashitara Shangri-Ira, are met multiple times during a single effect resolution, the effect will be applied, activated for the number of times the condition is met. That sounds like that's making things more crazy, not less. Please note that these changes are not yet reflected on some cards. For these cards, changes will be reflected in a future update. Example of cards where some of these effects changes are not yet reflected is Dark Room of Nightmare. Rules where a monster that met conditions of a trigger effect has its control changed before the effect is activated. If a monster that met the conditions of a trigger effect has its control changed before the effect is activated, the controller at the time of the effect activation can activate as its effect. Rules where monsters would be destroyed in battle. If a monster is destroyed, its card's name, type, attribute, attack, defense, level, etc. will not change from the monster would be destroyed in battle according to the damage calculation until it leaves the field. So basically, if there was something that would have changed its name, type, or anything as it was being destroyed that might in some way change the outcome, it's not going to change its name. Once it's destroyed and it keeps whatever name it has. These are all fairly big changes that probably need more in-depth commentary on as far as just generic rule changes. But in reality, there is just so many cards that there's a high chance where you're not going to have any card that is affected by those rule changes at all. So we've got some weirdness here now with the proficiency test. For a second there I thought they might be moving away from the Duel Live, but I don't know why they would take away the Duel Live or any other quests or missions like that. They should be adding more, not taking things away. But yeah. Guess we can jump to the shop and then open some bonus packs. Go and see what we got new. We have this one's new, Cucumber Horse, and Combination Attack is new, and the Judgment Hand is new. Then everything else is not new. Which, yeah, my enthusiasm for new cards in that collection is pretty low. Okay. So, I guess I need to do an academic exam, which it's very possible that these are going to get increasingly difficult. 3 out of 5 questions to pass correctly, and then I'll need to do a practical condition, which is activate trap cards and spell cards 3 or 2 times, And then I'll get this mate base of cards. Let's see. And they time you on this too. The 3 structured decks that can be chosen as rewards for completing the tutorial at the game of are Power of the Dragon, Synchro Unity, and what other deck? Oh my goodness. So you almost certainly wouldn't remember this, but I think it was Link Generation. Like, that was a year and a half ago for me. What type of card is this? This is a spellcaster type card. Which of the following cards cannot activate it on the turn it's set in a spell trap zone? A normal spell card, a continuous spell card, a quick play spell card. Apparently it's a quick play spell card. What mode of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel counts dual content related missions? Let's go with solo mode, I guess. Which of the following statements correctly describes the cards in your hands? You cannot have more than 7 cards in your hands. I can't even read that. In the draw phase, you should draw as many cards. That's wrong. There's no upper limit to the number of cards you can have in your hand. Let's go with this one. So I've effectively failed the proficiency test. Now what? We're at an impasse. So this is, I guess, good to learn. Can you just brute force the questions and get through the proficiency test that way, or are you just screwed now? I almost wouldn't be too upset with being screwed, although it would mean I'm missing out on content, but wasting my time on these kinds of tests when most players, including me, just want to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Is ridiculous. So yeah, unfair question here, because a lot of people started playing a year and a half ago, plus. This is a fair enough question, assuming you know Dark Magician, which they're going to refer back to Dark Magician a lot. But if you're brand new to Yu-Gi-Oh! And haven't watched any of the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime series, there's a decent chance that you won't be familiar with Dark Magician. There are many variants of Dark Magician that have been replaced, that have come out to kind of replace it as a top tier mascot character. Quick play spell cards can't be activated on the same turn they're set, apparently. Which, yeah, I don't think too many times people do that. Because quick play spell cards can also be activated from the hand, which is safer. And they're not mentioning that. What mode of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel counts dual content related missions? This is just a terribly worded question. It really just means what mode will let you accomplish the daily missions. But solo mode also is some of the daily missions. So if there is some limitation of you have to play in ranked mode to get progress for some things, I've never really seen that. It seems to me like playing spells and trap cards type missions are accomplishable while playing in solo mode. If they aren't, I never noticed that to be true. Which of the following statement correctly describes the cards in your hands? There's no upper limit to the number of cards that can be in your hand. Technically true, but you do have to discard in most cases at the end of the turn, which is what I thought I was clicking on. So let's just click try again and see if it's the exact same question. Or is this now a time-limited different question? Which of the following is how you obtain the Explorer tab? I assume this would be a lifetime mission reward. Apparently there's discovery mission rewards. Again, that would have been from a very long time ago. So these are different questions, but it doesn't seem like there's too many of them. What level is this card? How in the world am I supposed to know this? It's either going to be incredibly high or incredibly low. It looks to me like it probably is a 6 if it's a 5. Yeah. What type of card is this? It's going to be a dragon card. White, blue eyes. Each player has one Dark Magician in the graveyards. Which of the following is correct about the attack of Dark Magician Girl? Oh man, like you're supposed to know that. Let's go with 2600. Just guess. With 1 second left. I mean, really, this is just like school. It's like being back in school again and ruining the experience of playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Even more for very little reward. And honestly, if you were going to ask me these kind of questions, this feels like this should be random questions that pop up during loading screens that have very little reward and no penalty. I could see popping up a question like this while it's loading for the next game and saying, hey, there is no real timer, but whenever the next game connects, that's when you're out of time. Answer this question and we'll give you 10 gems, 1 gem even would be acceptable. Yeah, and you just have to be familiar enough with what Dark Magician Girl's starting attack plus how much she gains for each Dark Magician or Master of Black Chaos is in the graveyard, which inherently that question was not fully answerable because each player has one Dark Magician in the graveyard. They don't say if there were any Master of Chaos, Magician of Black Chaos is in the graveyard, so there is a possible different answer there. And again, if you haven't watched the original anime series and you're not memorizing what type Blue Eyes White Dragon is, you can get that wrong. You definitely can get this one wrong, and this is weird. You can click on the answer to see the card, but you can't click on the question to see the card. So this says 5, but inherently they've taken the number of stars out of the picture here, and I'm surprised they even spent the extra energy to do that. But yeah, I don't even know what a discovery mission reward is on that point. So our next clue condition is just to do spells and trap cards, and then that'll get us to Master Duel Proficiency 4. Meanwhile, the real focus is still to just work your way up the rank ladder. After the stream on Monday, I decided that I had too many YouTube shorts that needed to be made, so I started to run my automation on that. It still takes a level of babysitting. It's not like I can 100% with confidence walk out of the room, but there is at least a secondary process that is fairly robust, and I can kind of walk out of the room or just not care if something goes wrong. So I spent all the evening on Monday doing that, and a decent amount of Tuesday doing that. I did eventually get back to programming my smart on sign, doing a lot of just experimentation with HTML and the instructions, thinking in that process, doing some experimentation with the authorization, salting, and hashing of the passwords. Like for a while there, it seemed like there was something wrong with it and that I needed to change the code. And then all of a sudden the code started. So it's very possible what occurred is I put in like 5 A's as a password as a test, and then needed to put in 6 A's, and I was just like the letter A off, which inherently highlights how if you're going to use a temporary password, it should probably be ABC123, not AAA, and that's just laziness on my part. was not the one I intended to summon first, but whatever. Well, I guess I should have probably activated that skill, but whatever. Guess what I could do is add this to my hand and then activate this. I'm playing a little out of order today. So yeah, for the most part I'm just spent a lot of time optimizing the code, thinking about the instructions, and trying to double check that the password security handshake is going the way it should be going. Which, yeah, I think that is somewhat appreciable. Progress. I'm moving fairly slower than I'd like, though. I really should have just assumed that this whole thing was going to take a lot longer than I thought it would. I'm trying to see if I can get a one-turn kill. Let's see, 6,800, 8,000. Yeah, I think we just have like a one-turn kill there. Yeah, I suppose there really wasn't any big revolutionary things I learned in the code. It's just trying to optimize it, trying to get it to not make network calls. The thing about the code in particular, I've also ordered some of the final ESP32 chips I'm going to use to start thinking about encrypting the code and putting on secure bootloader on it. And having the code actually be safe instead of it just being plain text that anybody could easily read and copy and steal, since it is attempting to be a finalized product that will be sold in the end. But the thing about the code in particular is when you are taught programming, or at least when I was taught programming a long time ago, it all was very much, there was one thread, there was one processor. Oh, I guess I should also warn, I may end up running to the bathroom quite a bit today. I think my stomach's upset from something I ate. But anyway, when I was taught programming, it basically was one thread and one processor style of mentality, even if you actually did have 2 or 3 threads that a Windows operating system might be leaning on. In most part, you weren't being taught early on how to implement code that would run asynchronously in parallel. And even now in games, even decades after progress as far as computer programming and video game development happens, there still is a considerably high amount of programming that is done in a somewhat linear fashion, assuming you have only one thread, one core in the processor, and there's very little optimization on any levels to look at a computer and say this computer has 4 cores and 8 threads or more, and try and optimize any of that. But particularly in Arduino and with an ESP32, there are 2 cores on some of them, but then there's, depending on what ESP32, there's actually only 1 core. Now this is interestingly contrasted in the fact that even when I was first being taught programming, the amount of megahertz you had was fairly high. I've effectively gone not only full circle, but somewhat backwards in that programming for an ESP32 at somewhere around 240 megahertz is almost certainly about half the number of megahertz I would have had on a Pentium 1 processor or Pentium 2 processor computer that I was programming on when I was first learning programming. And now, of course, computers are way, way higher than that. The point being, that creates this deadly combination of it being incredibly easy for teachers to not emphasize optimizing your code so that it runs either asynchronously or it runs efficiently in each loop of the main loop, each cycle of the main function. Because the megahertz are just so high, you can counteract any poor optimization with the high megahertz, while also not encourage any more optimization with the high megahertz on a single core. And there is definitely no thoughts or talk about efficiency cores and having cores that run at much lower frequencies to accomplish much smaller tasks. All of that is out the window when you're programming for an ESP32. So I have a main loop that is effectively needing to, in some instances, check to see if it's connected to the Wi-Fi, but connecting to the Wi-Fi and making that check is effectively a blocking function that takes a while to happen and then won't let anything else happen until then, once it's waiting for that return from that function call. So again, no asynchronicity there, and I'm not really trying to implement asynchronicity because I'm programming for a device that wouldn't have 2 cores, so there wouldn't be a real way to do it easily. So I'm effectively doing a pseudo asynchronicity where I'm saying just have a number, a count, and when the count hits 100, when you've gone through the main loop 100 times, check to see if the Wi-Fi is good, or something like that. It's like you don't have to check it every single loop, however long it takes you to do every single loop, but at 240 megahertz, you're going to be doing quite a few loops in a minute, more than 60. And so that's where I'm trying to get the optimization in, is to say I really don't need to always check in every loop to see if the Wi-Fi is happening, but I also can't just wait until the Wi-Fi is connected and then never check again, because then you're making everything else wait. And one of the things that needs to happen every loop is it needs to check also whether it wants to blink the light on and off to indicate that it's not connected. And any small mistake there either breaks the any blocking function breaks the light blinking, so then it looks like the light is just on or the light is just off, the exact opposite of what you really would want to have occur. So yeah, it creates in C code too a scenario where you're inherently best off making what would be considered pretty poor code in other instances, where it's just a bunch of if and else statements in a ladder. If this happens, run this code. If it's not happening, don't run this code. Check to see if you need to run the next code instead. And yeah, you can just keep on doing that over and over again. I guess I'm just winning here. I think I did fix one bug by simply having the program run a delay in the WebSocket network connection, that it was just not ready yet to apparently receive a signal, when really there shouldn't ever really be a need to run a delay. But if you're communicating with other people's software, sure, there might be cases when you need to implement delays. I guess it's just gonna really come down to whether I think I can win here or whether I need to do any more special summons, because I could do like a special summon here and be a lot more powerful. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that and then we'll win. These first couple of games have been incredibly pushover games, which very well may just mean that I'm too low in the ranks for the quality of the deck I have. I need to be higher before I even start to see a challenge. Yeah, if anything, mostly yesterday I was just trying to experiment and struggle with the HTML. The fact that the HTML, when you go up to the setup page in the captive portal, is fairly limited. You can't do a lot of JavaScript and things when you're signing into a captive portal. It's a sandboxed environment. So I wanted to have like a button where you clicked a button and then it would add something to the clipboard. But yeah, it won't let you do that. In the same way, I imagine if I was to try to make a link that made a mail to link, I should experiment with this, but it probably won't work either, where you could email the instructions to yourself from the captain portal. The main idea is I have instructions here which include a import file for advanced scene switcher, which is really just a ton of text nonsense to most people. Even to me, it's fairly obtuse. So yeah, next stream I guess we'll go to Proficiency 4. And we'll get 5 legacy packs, and I imagine this is just going to keep on going for a while. Wouldn't be surprised if there's 20 levels. Although I also wouldn't be surprised if it just stops at 5. They may run out of questions pretty quickly. But yeah, just doing a lot of experiment on, do I want the instructions to be in a text area HTML tag, or do I just want it to be plain HTML? And can I get the word wrapping and everything to word wrap easily without having to manually put in a bunch of the BR break tags? But yeah, if anything, I would say my skill of writing instructions and interacting with humans is going to be fairly low. I also would like the code to be as small as possible, but in the end, I don't think it's going to matter too much. I could probably put in several paragraphs of text and it still would fit. There's a slight weirdness as I've been looking at Twitter in that I've seen a few more cosplayers in the past couple days cosplaying video games, when noticeably I really didn't see any of that in Halloween. So either people are getting very late to showing off their costumes from Halloween and posting them on Twitter, or Twitter is dying, which is a very valid argument to make. Or just cosplaying in general for video games is just not that popular, which in some of that I would also probably agree with. Let's see if this works. I don't think that spell actually stops a spell from activating, though. On the idea of cosplaying, though, they are still promoting the idea of November 7th in 7 Day for Mass Effect. It really feels like at this point they should give it up. The creators of Mass Effect did put out a teaser trailer for Mass Effect 4, so obviously they aren't giving up on the series, and I'm not suggesting that, but I think the idea of trying to own a specific day is kind of crazy. There's going to be some bigger event that either is already happening on November 7th or will happen in November 7th. So the idea of trying to own that for your video game quadrilogy, of which maybe 2.5 of those games are actually good, is a little crazy. Inherently, you still have big problems with the Mass Effect series in that there's a very inconsistent trilogy of Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3, and arguably there might be a fairly large split between fans of Mass Effect 1 and Mass Effect 2. Not, I think, a huge amount of fans of Mass Effect 3, and that split is going to have to be addressed at some point. But then you also have the stinker of Mass Effect Andromeda and Mass Effect 3's ending. On top of which, you have this crushing weight in that there's just ever increasing an amount of time in which Mass Effect is losing its relevancy. And there isn't even another game that feels super like Mass Effect you'd think maybe Starfield could come out and say, boy, did that feel like Mass Effect, or did it learn a lot from Mass Effect, or boy, is Starfield way worse than Mass Effect. But those kinds of conversations never really happened. So, I mean, it's just not in the common vernacular or mentality of players at the moment to be thinking about Mass Effect. And the cosplay, as far as sci-fi outfits here, looks fine, and it's decent enough. If anything, it strikes back to a more subtle concept of not going too overboard with these Star Trek uniforms. But yeah, it also is not in a crazy outfit, though, that screams amazingly interesting to me either. I have no idea if this is supposed to be a specific character. I don't know what these logos are supposed to stand for or look like. I don't know if I could really place the gun if I saw it in the abstract, or the outfit in general if I saw it in the abstract. If you just showed me this picture, I might go, okay, that looks like some kind of cosplay of some kind of character, but I couldn't probably place it without having the Mass Effect N7 hashtag on it. The bigger news, Bloomberg says Rockstar Games is going to announce Grand Theft Auto 6 as early as this week. I believe this has been updated, and they've actually admitted it and put out a trailer. We need to see the trailer because personally I have a real question as far as what the next GTA is going to look like and feel like. Inherently, you're setting yourself up for frustration because whatever the next GTA game is going to be, it almost certainly is going to be a game full of gambling mechanics and microtransactions and pushing people to play GTA Online style mechanics. You only have to look at GTA Online and to see what they want the next GTA game to be, unless they are going to try something really crazy and make a split there and really make GTA a solo experience only with no microtransactions or DLC or season passes. Meanwhile, the other big news here is Nintendo says it will continue to release new titles for Switch without being bound to the traditional concept of a platform lifecycle, which on one hand I feel like this is Nintendo has gone on a full-on tirade due to several statements that have been made against the idea of people potentially not buying more Switches, not buying more video games this Christmas season, just because a Switch 2 is coming out. It might give a hint that the Switch 2 is that theoretical, you're going to have to plug this into a TV to play with it, power, and that the Switch is going to try and perhaps integrate somewhat into a more powerful Xbox Series X style console. I wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo's new plan really is to try and trick people into thinking that their new mobile device, the Switch, was going to be the only device they made, and then they just bait and switch it and go, no, actually we now have a more traditional TV console thing. Because you really need that power. Even Nintendo, I think, really needs that power for third-party developers. what this does. I feel like I've forced him to get rid of 3 of his cards for the expense of 4 of my cards, but 2 of which I wanted in the graveyard. Either this guy's contradicting my plans quite a bit, or he's falling desperately into my trap. I'm gonna add one of these to the hand. Then go ahead and toss one of these. Same card. Okay. So this has stopped me from special summoning things. So then I'm gonna toss this. And put this here. And then I'm gonna activate this. Do I want to do 3 or do I want to do 2? Three and then 4, or just 4? We'll try 3. Honestly, I may just been doing this all wrong the whole time. And I should have always been, yeah, almost certainly have been doing this wrong the whole time. Yeah, I think of one here. Unless he's got some major trick he can do. But yeah, it definitely seems like Nintendo is trying very, very hard to convince people to continue to buy Switch games, Switch hardware. They've got that going. Here we can see YouTube Gaming is trying to get people excited about Modern Warfare 3 in a very poor way, as far as just having these really tiny little thumbnails for different locations. Then they're saying they're pointing out the Legend of Zelda movie, which has been announced as a live-action movie. I believe this is Drunk Link from a YouTube Dorkly video or something. They're giving away free Genshin Impact bundles for people who have YouTube Premium. They're also, YouTube in general is going crazy about trying to crack down as much as possible on ad blockers. And I also believe they've raised the price of YouTube Premium, so even your alternate option there to appropriately support YouTube in the way they want to be supported is screwing you over. It gets a little scary to see all these actions happen at once, as far as is this potentially going to be at some point something really drastic? YouTube does something really drastic, such as like delete people's videos that aren't monetized, start to say, hey, you don't have 1,000 subscribers, you're not in the YouTube partner program, so we're going to just start deleting your videos or stopping you from uploading new content, or are we going to just shut down YouTube altogether? Unlikely that that would happen, but I mean, you start to see desperate moves as rats leave a sinking ship, and I'm a little afraid that some of these desperate moves are rats leaving a sinking ship, that they inherently, the people in charge of YouTube, are causing to sink themselves. Blood's on the chat. He says, sup, how are you? You won the game, good job. Thanks, Blood. YouTube gaming, 11 years for Scott DeWaz, highlighting him. 15 years for Rhyme Style, don't even know who that is. There's still not a lot that they're promoting Ninja, I guess. On YouTube too, it seems like there's at least a couple people upset with Mr. Beast, but since Mr. Beast seems to be universally liked for his altruism that he does for his videos, which in fairness benefits him a lot too, but if that's the way to get things done, well, so be it in my book. I built a bunch of whales for people, which inherently, building a bunch of wells in Africa and actually getting it done, in from the one screenshot I saw looked like the appropriate way, is actually way better than it sounds as far as actually accomplishing things, whereas so many charities and organizations accomplish almost nothing and only exist to line the pockets of their board members and keep their employees employed. But in particular, I know that there's at least one religious organization, missionary workers, probably a lot, that have for decades gone and built wells in incredibly poor ways, because some of it having to do with a lack of being able to get materials to the remote locations, some of it being just to the people in charge not being the right people, smart, trained, intelligent people to know how to properly build a well. But yeah, the idea of poor villages needing access to clean water has been an idea in particular, as far as a charitable goal, for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and it still has really not been addressed properly. So it's nice to see Mr. Beast possibly make some more progress there. Dying or getting sick because you don't have access to clean water is something that really shouldn't happen to even the most impoverished people. Of course, there are definitely some people out there that don't believe in germs, entire societies that don't believe in germs, so if you can't convince them that clean water is different than dirty water, they're still going to end up dying and getting sick. I'd like to see, as far as a charitable thought, and more people planting bamboo. Bamboo makes like 80% more oxygen than your average tree does, is what I heard, at least. Might be wrong about the numbers there. So while it might be an invasive species and it might cause a lot of problems elsewhere, I think probably does make a lot of sense to try and grow bamboo. Although it may be a case that bamboo just requires a lot more water or just can't be grown in a lot of climates. But yeah. Until we can potentially genetically engineer super trees, having more trees to create more oxygen, lock down, and remove as much carbon out of the air would be good for everybody. Yeah. None of that has anything really to do with video game news, though. The problem right now is I'm moving a little slow, and on top of that, I'm actually succeeding a little too much on Yu-Gi-Oh! So I actually do want to focus and move up the ranks and succeed, but the more I succeed, the less I get bored. The more I reduce the amount I get bored with Yu-Gi-Oh! And thus the more I play Yu-Gi-Oh! Instead of talking about news. Plus I've got a pretty good system going here. In which I am getting like one-turn kills and it's not being countered, which might be an argument that the current deck I'm building and playing is coming back into being a good meta deck. This was a weird bit of news. What is that? I don't know what I just did there that caused the macro to switch over 3 different times. Persona 5 Tacticia was briefly released on Steam today, over a week early. Users reported being able to play the game after it was accidentally made available. What's weird is I really didn't even think Persona 3 Tacticia was coming to Steam. We don't see a lot of this, but we do see enough of this where it does make me wonder if it might be a little bit too easy to post a game on Steam. It might be a little too easy to click the OK button and click to publish or have the wrong date. I don't know how you really prevent it 100% from happening. It very possibly is a testament to the Sony Atlas company, or Atlas in particular, I imagine is the publisher in this case. Just not being familiar with Steam, not being familiar with the idea of putting in the right dates and clicking the right buttons to publish a game on Steam. Maybe it's intentional sometimes. Maybe this is a new scheme that we're going to see people do, is that they're going to quote-unquote accidentally release their game early so that it gets a little bit more buzz. In all fairness, I've been completely uninterested in Persona 5 Tacticia because it's a weird spin-off game of the Persona series and not really what I think even Persona fans want. And so they may be getting feedback that they just haven't gotten enough news buzz, news coverage, or enough excitement in people. GameDeveloper.com has this report that says the Timesplitters developer Free Radical may be shut down again. 2 years after the old revived iteration, the 2-year-old revived iteration of Radical Design may be closed down again as the Embracer Group continues months-long company restructuring. Now, this was one of the games that just kind of came out of the blue from Free Radical, and that they put it out there, but I wouldn't be surprised if they found that they contractually were required to put out this old game. And thus Duel game that they did put out got put out just to meet a contract thing. It wasn't a Time Splitters game though. They're not even mentioning the game that they released. It was like a couple of weeks ago, out of the blue. That too could also have been a desperation play, in that they were putting out anything and everything they could put out to try and make some money for what feels very much like the imploding Embracer Group. And honestly, we really don't even have to question what will happen if the Embracer Group fully imploded, because you only really have to look up the history of THQ. That's basically it. Like, all the Embracer Group is THQ version 2.0 at this point, and they are failing as terribly as THQ version 1 happened to fail. And it's just clearly they needed new ideas and fresh ideas, and they really didn't have it. At a certain level, it probably comes down to, if you're a corporate person and you're acquiring a bunch of companies, maybe the take half mentality really should be taken there. As far as, if somebody gives you a weed brownie, the joke is that you should only eat half of it and then wait a few hours to see for it to kick in. For corporations acquiring businesses, maybe you should only acquire about half as many businesses as you think you should, and then wait a few years and see what happens there. I know corporations these days hate the idea of sitting on cash, but it really is the wiser move, is to have some cash on hand, have a way in which you can have a few bad quarters and report a few bad quarters and it not ruin your company. I did want to talk about this cosplayer doing Jinx. Jinx is a very interesting visual character from, I believe, League of Legends. I know absolutely nothing about League of Legends, but I recognize Jinx inherently from it. And this highlights kind of the great contrast we often see as far as characters in video games, and where the costume and cosplaying could come from, is that unless you do have a visually distinct character in some way, they have an interesting gun, they have an interesting costume, they have an interesting hairstyle, an interesting makeup, they're just not going to really stand out. I assume Jinx has all these tattoos. These looks like fairly fake tattoos, if I was to guess. And certainly that's a lesson, to not go all weeaboo here, but it is a lesson that a lot of Japanese animators learn fairly quickly, is that you make your interesting characters extremely interesting, like they would stand out in a crowd, no matter, even amongst other cosplayers. As for a costume, this does look like quite a lot of work, because you're going to have these, what I assume are fake extensions, as far as these super long hair, which hair that long is way too long. Once you get to about here on the length of hair, that's about as long as you want to get to it. You're going to get a ton of knots and problems, and you're going to run into the problem that every time you sit down on the toilet, the hair is going to be dangerously close to rubbing against your butt or in the toilet, and you only get out of that problem by the time you have to have everything braided, and you're spending potentially one day a week, one day a month braiding all your hair just to try to make it somewhat manageable. But in a video game or cartoon character, you can't have that level of extremeness. You can't go past what is realistic as far as hairstyles, and you can have crazy or high fashion. Which in the real world, we could certainly also have crazy high fashion clothes, but most people don't do that. They don't want to stand out. Most people are, to some small level, shy. You wouldn't be going to your work or your school and it be considered appropriate to wear something like Jinx is wearing, just by the bright color patterns alone, let alone the skin and belly showing. We may have already talked about this, but the former Forza boss, Alan Hartman, has been appointed the head of Xbox Game Studios. He takes on the role that was previously held by Matt Booty. Inherently, what this mostly highlights to me, though, is you have Phil Spencer, who is the head of Microsoft Gaming, and then you have a whole second tier of, you have a Phil Spencer, and then you have a whole second tier of other subdivisions of Microsoft, and I feel like these are all wholly owned just divisions, not subsidiaries. They don't, I think, have any kind of different legal standing, but Xbox Game Studios being one of them, and then in that you have the Alan Hartman role, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's another tier or two before you finally get down to an associate level employee at Microsoft who is just a programmer, just a voice actor, just somebody who is working and has nobody reporting under them and acting as a manager. Even if it really is only 3 steps on a rung, it's still probably 1 step too many. It would be more ideal if every single employee could report directly to Phil Spencer, and Phil Spencer could somehow know what every single employee is doing, but in reality they have so many employees that's not likely to happen. So a 3-rung tier system is fine, except for the fact that then there are several more tiers of Microsoft above Microsoft Gaming, at least 1 or 2. But even at that, being 5 steps away from a CEO is probably a pretty good position to be in compared to a lot of other jobs where you're 12 to 25, or if not more, steps away from being the CEO or being anywhere near the CEO to report to them or potentially be promoted to them. Yeah, I guess that's an interesting thought that I would challenge people to think, certainly, is if you think someday you might be a millionaire, and ask the same question and see if you get the same answer. Do you think someday you'll be the boss of the company you work at? The CEO, the person in charge? If you don't think there's any chance of that, then there really shouldn't be any chance that you would be a millionaire. Yes, you can have fantastical, ridiculous hopes to win the lottery or inherit money, but as far as in the corporate structure, yeah, if you're never going to get a raise, if you're never going to get a promotion, or you'll get 1 small raise or 1 small promotion in your lifetime of working, yeah, you're never going to be part of the 1% of the elite rich people. Back to Nintendo. Nintendo's share prices jumped to its highest in 2 years following a Zelda movie news. It's reportedly the largest leap since December of 2020. There's a whole pandemic and all of that too. This will soon be on the Yandex. Isn't that what the Japanese stock market is called? Doesn't actually say, does it? There's a real danger here that people should be afraid of, though, is that you've got this new president in charge of Nintendo, and he's made the Mario movie. The Mario movie has succeeded. We were all fairly glad that it wasn't absolute garbage. They very possibly took the wrong messages and are going to stunt cast a lot of other comedic garbage actors who are going to do very poor Mario impressions in future Mario games. Mario movies, not games. So yeah, we would hope that they're not going to just hire some celebrity stunt character to be Link. Link inherently in a Zelda movie probably shouldn't be talking that much anyway, so that is another thought to at least have, is that there's interesting, you can cancel out of activating an effect now. Couldn't do that before. That's helpful. So many times I've accidentally tried to activate an effect to realize I can't actually do it. If anything, I suppose the bigger question is who's your Zelda character? Because you kind of want somebody big, and you kind of want somebody who is exotic in their look. And I don't know who that really would be. I almost think you might want to get the lady who played Wonder Woman, that Israeli, I believe, actress. It's not like there's been any famous actresses who have cosplayed as Zelda, and whoever you pick as Zelda is potentially just going to be under a lot of makeup anyways to look like an elf lady. But yeah, there's definitely questions as far as who would be your Ganondorf, who would be your Zelda, who would be your Link characters. And either you're going to get those characters very correctly. I could see Henry Cavill, the guy who played The Witcher, he could probably make a decent Zelda, Ganondorf character. He could be the bad guy there, and that might work very well. Again, under a long mask, makeup and stuff. I guess the question also as far as the adventures of Link games and Zelda games, which story, if any, is the movie going to be based off of? Because you'd almost think that it would be Breath of the Wild, but I don't even know if Breath of the Wild is particularly a great story to lean on to make a movie compared to Ocarina of Time, which would obviously be the right pick to cover. Which then brings about the question, will there be a young Zelda and a young Link and younger Ganondorf? So yeah, it makes your mind wonder and excites certainly quite a bit to announce a Zelda movie. But to get back to my point, my concern here is I don't want Nintendo to become a movie production company. One of the strikes just ended, which, okay, that's one other thing to take into consideration, although it doesn't affect video games too much. But yeah, if all of a sudden we see 2 or 3 fewer games coming out each year from Nintendo because somebody at Nintendo is more focused on taking meetings with movie production companies and making movies, that's a real problem. And inherently it is this backwards line of thinking that video games are less viewed and less ingested than movies are, and that's just not the case. Particularly when you think about like Mario movies and Zelda movies, you're not getting a 70-year-old man to go and watch those movies for no reason. He might watch it if he has grandkids, or if he already had fandom for Mario or Zelda. But somebody who's never played games in your life is not going to go and watch a Nintendo movie for no good reason. Whereas they might go watch a Mission Impossible movie or a new Ghostbusters movie, which apparently one of those has been announced. So I don't think you're really growing your audience. Maybe it's cheaper or easier to make movies these days at this point, but video games by far are better, and Zelda and Mario, both characters designed specifically and uniquely to be really good examples of protagonists in video games with that interactivity. They are not good examples of non-interactive storytelling elements. Where it seems like if Nintendo's not careful, they may try to usher in a new era of reverse movie port, whereas we had an era in the 80s and 90s of movies being ported to video games and them all being awful because the inherent concept of taking a non-interactive movie and putting little effort into it and turning it into a video game was a dumb idea. We might have the exact opposite, an era now where we have interactive video games that continuously just through momentum get made into movies and all suck. Which it's always been that case for the most part. You get the occasional successful thing like a Tomb Raider movie, but then for the Angelina Jolie big name recognition Tomb Raider movies, you also have a lot of other failures as far as the Assassin's Creed movie, the Tomb Raider without Angelina Jolie movie, and I think there was an Uncharted movie that wasn't a success. There has been success around the Last of Us TV series, and TV series probably are a better way to go anyways because it just gives you more time. But inherently the Last of Us game wasn't that interactive of an experience in the first place. So I'm hoping Nintendo doesn't lose its way, although in all fairness, a lot of Nintendo's way is to really just be kind of jerks and barely make games that are good. So maybe they will find a bit more of a better attitude in general in all their actions if they did change some things up. But also you just don't want to see it go the way of Disney, in which Disney increasingly has gotten worse and worse about making movies that anybody actually seems to want to watch, and definitely doesn't want to make animated movies anymore. And they are ever increasing the expenses to go to their theme parks. Here we have a Video Games Chronicle article. Elon Musk says that he will, quote, look into PlayStation and Xbox removing Twitter integration. The fact that it just got removed and he hadn't already had these conversations and he's just saying he's looking into it now is really to show that he is definitely not having the conversations with company partners that he probably should want to stay partners with. The mobile game I'm playing, one of them, Memento Mori, is removing the ability to link an account via Twitter and or X. Yeah, it seems like with the API changes, basically nobody is willing to continue to do business with Twitter. Yep. We don't get to see this too often where you have someone effectively drag a entire company down with them. So it'll be interesting to see where it all ends up, but it almost certainly ends up with Elon Musk eventually bailing out of Twitter and somebody else taking it over. There's too much of a customer base, or at least a perceived customer base, to get rid of it. I believe another thing he said, and it really just highlights how much Elon Musk says, that within a year Twitter would become a dating site, which, yeah, I don't think anybody wants that. I heard of some dating site where your friends recommended people for you to date, which, I mean, honestly, that seems very crazy, but it is kind of the old way in which things would do. People would set each other up on blind dates and things like that. Alright, I guess we've done all the missions, so I don't really have any reason to spend extra time playing. And I guess these were the discovery missions. These were added somewhere slightly before the 1-year anniversary, if I recall correctly, and I got them all done, and then that was that. So for the proficiency test to ask me anything about it is asking too much. Yeah, Embracer's Time Splitter Studio free radical faces closure. We already kind of talked about this. Let's see if they mention the game that they'd put out. I feel like it's a case that everything Embracer has faces closure. Nintendo has confirmed that its new development center has been delayed to make it bigger. I feel like they said this a couple weeks ago, like almost a month ago. Maybe they're saying it again, or maybe this is just Video Games Chronicle finally getting around to getting that message. Inherently, this new Nintendo development center may also be what is making Nintendo act in strange ways now, is that they are just all focused on building a new building and expanding. The thing to take from this is that a lot of this may be hardware development, and very little of it may be game development, because almost a significant portion of Nintendo games are secretly, if not publicly known, to be developed by second-party developers. People hired to program games, and then Nintendo just slaps their name on it. And that they are kind of more of a hardware company than you would really think, which is why they push their hardware gimmicks so much. Of course, it could go the other way. This could be all programmers. They might try to acquire a lot of the second-party companies and make them work directly under Nintendo and only make games for Nintendo consoles. But yeah, since Nintendo is fairly focused on hardware sales and its gimmick hardware and that, it doesn't inspire any big confidence, regardless of whether they build a big new facility or not, that at some point they would see themselves as a software company and start making games for either other consoles or PC. So I feel like you could easily make a bet right now that in the next 20 years you still won't see a Nintendo game officially, legally on a PC or on Steam, whereas everything else pretty much loves to be on Steam. Although, in all fairness, the momentum of starting to see more and more PC games on Steam from Japanese companies might eventually push Nintendo to also jump on that bandwagon, and they may start to put some of their games on PC, particularly since their newest games do feel like they are being programmed on Unreal Engine, where it's a lot easier to port an Unreal Engine game for the Switch to also PC. I imagine we'll start to see leaks of PC builds for Nintendo games for a few years before we finally see them give up and put it on PC officially. It's been confirmed that the first Grand Theft Auto 6 trailer will premiere next month, so this is basically an announcement for an announcement. But that is definitely the trailer I would want to see, is just what is a GTA 6 going to look like. I'm seeing a bunch of neon and palm trees, which, okay, that gives maybe a 90s or late 80s feel of when a time setting might be set, and maybe in that time setting you can then still have a lot of what would be cancelable in most games still exist. You could have a lot of like sexualization, racism, just evil things that you would associate with bad guys in GTA still being said and shown. Strippers, things like that. And Grand Theft Auto in general is fairly solid and shielded from that. It'd be kind of silly for somebody to make a GTA game and say this game takes it too far and this objectifies women too much, or this game has black criminals so it's racist, or anything like that. It would be more irritating, frankly, if it was super liberal and progressive and the new GTA character was like a Muslim woman stealing cars while wearing a hijab and spouting out a bunch of SJW nonsense in the process, and that it was all like rah-rah feminine, taking back the power. That would be way worse. That this is effectively like a mob movie. Like, yes, Italians don't like mob movies because it depicts Italians as mobsters. A GTA game is going to depict somebody as a criminal and have criminal characters, and so it's appropriate to depict them as being morally corrupt and wrong and evil, whatever words you want to use. Let's see. The Alchemy Labs co-founder Devin Rimmer has launched a VR studio called Astrobeam, according to GameDeveloper.com. I suppose that's not this big news now in my book. Well, Black Friday seems to be around the bend, but they do seem like they are increasingly trying to advertise sales even faster. Here's a Lego Super Mario Donkey Kong Treehouse expansion set for $9 off, and another Lego Mario set. But as far as Walmart Black Fridays sales, that's not a super long list, nor does it look like any great deal. So you'd have to get into the weeds as far as buying any kind of gaming laptop. You probably shouldn't be buying a gaming laptop in the first place. You should probably buy a gaming desktop. And a Samsung 4K 65-inch for $400 might be something, but it has the Tizen TV smart TV built into it, so you would have to learn their operating system of Tizen instead of, say, a Apple TV layout or an Amazon TV or Google TV, Chromecast TV layout or Roku TV layout. I saw a Samsung QLED, which if your room cannot be darkened, I would heavily recommend a QLED. Was on sale for about $2,000 off. It was still $1,000. It was an 85-inch, so still a decent price at that. But yeah, it also was only for teachers and people in school, which at that price point, that's fairly high too. Here's an example of not news in that Sony says the latest PS5 update, quote, improves system performance, which, yeah, if you've got nothing more you can say because the update notes are literally just updates, improves system performance, don't make an article. It's pointless. Apparently Chucky and Tiffany, I assume Tiffany is the girl Chucky doll, co-bad guy of the series, are the next horror slashers coming to Dead by Daylight. I assume this is Tiffany. There is a question there, certainly as far as the hit box and the hurt box of a character that is much smaller as far as how it goes. But maybe that makes the game a little bit more interesting in that you have these really short characters. Here they have a long list of all of the different video game and horror movie characters that they've been able to license. And I assume as long as those licenses don't run out, you can always go back and play as those characters. But yeah, if the license did run out, I would imagine Dead by Daylight would be in trouble. Let's see, we already talked about the live action Zelda movie to say effectively nothing, really. If it is a live action movie, there is definitely an argument in bringing in Shigeru Miyamoto and having him play some character in the movie. But if you did bring in Shigeru Miyamoto, then you have to also recognize that the live action movie is going to have an Asian character compared to every other character in the live action movie, I assume being more of a Western character. And you do definitely have that split where there have been times where Link and Zelda have been depicted to be a little bit more Asian, and the other characters have been depicted to be a little bit more Asian in the Japanese release of Zelda games, where then they are depicted as more Western. And in that, it often is just stereotypical how big are their eye slits, or what color is their hair type descriptors. It is very possible, like, I don't know if we have any real confirmation here, that this is one more of a Japanese movie with the budget of a Japanese movie, which tends to be very low, or something like a Netflix movie where the budget tends not to be that high compared to a big Hollywood blockbuster. Weirdly, they are also partnering with Sony Pictures, which I think really just highlights how Nintendo does not really see Sony as a direct enemy to the point where they just wouldn't do business with them. If anything, they still very much are in the case where they would want to do business with Sony, a Japanese company, to make movies versus, say, doing business with whatever happened to the Weinstein Company or Warner Brothers, now owned by AT&T would be probably a better argument. I imagine, yeah, Warner Brothers would love to do that, or Disney would love to do a Zelda movie, but they're picking Sony almost by default because it is a Japanese company, a big Japanese company. This is interesting, in my opinion, in the second reason, in that ex-Escapist staff have launched a new games media website called Second Wind, but in reality, this is probably the third or fourth wind for Escapist staff, because they have been acquired and laid off. There was some controversy around, I think, one of the movie guys, in which they kicked him out of the group. Escapist at one time was a full-on video game website, whereas for the most part it has just been zero punctuation in the past few years, in my mind. That's the only thing that's really interesting. Yahtzee Crenshaw and ex-EIC Nick Calandra have formed this Second Wind, which is to probably ignore a lot of people who have long since been kicked out of Escapist. Effectively, the Escapist is dead, as I understand it, and zero punctuation being owned by the Escapist means it's probably dead. Zero punctuation as a concept probably should have died 5 or 6 years ago, because it only worked back when YouTube Shorts videos and animations would work, because they were getting lots of likes and thumbs up, and the algorithm cared about that. As soon as the YouTube algorithm changed for watch time, animation like the escape, like Zero Punctuation, started to fail horribly. Just because the videos were so short and it took them so long. And I really haven't heard anything from Zero Punctuation in a long time, so I can't even say if my opinions even slightly align with what he says or how he reviews games in the first place. But yeah, it's another death knell to mainstream video game journalism, which maybe we are better off with the death of mainstream video game journalism. In particular, the story around this is that the company was eventually, amongst I think several other acquisitions, acquired by Gamers, Gamurs, who then, I believe, laid off basically all the writers from all the places they had acquired in favor of having one editor look at like AI generated articles and just edit it for accuracy. And so they just basically trying to lay off everybody. And inherently, this is the same old story over and over again, in that you have a somewhat successful, somewhat popular mainstream video game journalist site that all of them give off the air like they are independent when they really aren't independent and they're owned by somebody. And that's the first problem, is that if you purely were independent, like I'm independent, nobody owns me, nobody can acquire my company without my say or lay me off or do anything like that, other than perhaps YouTube by deleting my channel. But even then, I could go somewhere else and still do the same old thing. That's not true for anybody else. Like Giant Bomb's owned by somebody. Escapist was owned by somebody. Even companies that felt like they were being run by just a couple of people or a small group of people are secretly being run by production companies. Geek and Sundry is a great example of this. It's a very old example at this point, but yeah, Geek and Sundry sold itself very much like it was an independent thing being run by two specific celebrities, and it just wasn't the case. And then those two specific celebrities were basically kicked out, and so now, while there is a Geek and Sundry still to exist, it is nothing. It's not the same presenters, it's not the same kind of content. Really, it feels nothing like what the original Geek and Sundry, G4 TV, when they tried to reboot, we knew it wasn't independent, but it also clearly was trying to sell itself as being more independent, and it was wild and could do anything at any time, and really it wasn't. It was just a standard corporate concept that was destroyed and shut down the second they realized they couldn't make money on it. But yeah, we need almost certainly, I would say, way more independent journalism, if not 100% independent journalism in video game world, because as soon as you have a moneyed interest, as soon as you have a corporate interest, it just falls apart. Which isn't to say I inherently condemn people from maybe making their own website and running ads on their own website to fund themselves. That's fine in my book, as long as it's not too extreme with the ads. But as soon as you are trying to be acquired, as soon as you're open to that conversation, that's the point where you sell your soul to the devil. And that's the point where it may be a year from now, it may be 10 years from now, it may be 50 years from now, but eventually you're going to lose control of your business. They're going to lay off people, they're going to give you notes, they're going to start changing things, and it's going to be worse. Your website is going to get worse, your journalism is going to get worse. And that's not just video game journalism. Inherently, that's the problem with all journalism, is that there's too many money interests. And that, if anything, it would be nice if there was public funding for independent people, where you could say, hey, I'm an independent journalist, here's how many articles I put out in a day to justify that I'm actually doing the work. Now give me some of that public broadcasting funding, like send me a check, because you should support independent public broadcasting that much. Although, in fairness, I'm saying public broadcasting and PBS when really very little, if any, of that funding for PBS is actually coming from the government. It's actually still being run by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a corporation. But yeah, if anything, it would make a lot more sense just to have universal basic income for everybody, and then people that wanted to be independent journalists could do that without starving to death. That's the best solution for everybody. Apparently, Blizzard's president says players quote, have no patience and want new stuff every hour. Don't say that out loud. I mean, it's very questionable how some of these people get in charge when they're being quoted as saying things so obviously incendiary, even if it's true. Quote, we're trying to react that way while holding the Blizzard quality bar high. And who is this president? Let's see if we can get to really the name. Mike Ybarra. If anything, I think this puts Mike Ybarra definitely in the targets as somebody who probably shouldn't stay around for much longer now that Microsoft owns Activision Blizzard. There is, I suppose, a danger here with the Activision Blizzard merger going through that some of the more standoffish people in Activision Blizzard feel protected and secure to come out and say stupid things, but they really shouldn't get that message at all. And this is only a very small stupid thing to say. Yes, do people want more stuff all the time? Do people not have patience on other people's scales? Totally true. In every situation. Always. So there's no reason to state the obvious. There's no reason to say it out loud. This is only going to come off as you're blaming your consumers for the fact that you're not making enough content, or you're blaming the consumers for not being happy with the content that's being delivered. Plenty of people, while everybody would love more, plenty of people play plenty of games in which they are satisfied. Baldur's Gate 3, a great example, and I'm sure Mike Ybarra might be thinking of Baldur's Gate 3 in comparison as far as how little may be getting added to World of Warcraft compared to Baldur's Gate 3. It is also worth mentioning, and this was one of those stories that was not reported by any Western news sources, but the ratings board for Japan to release Baldur's Gate 3 has highlighted that several, or the game company themselves highlighted that to pass the ratings board, several things have been censored in Japan for the PlayStation 4 release of it, I believe in specific, but I could be wrong. One, the showing of lower genitals, which is illegal in Japan, as an option, has been completely removed. So the game is, in every definition of the word, censored in the Japanese release. Which, it's always funny that people claim that Japanese people are more perverted when, by law, there's more censorship in Japan than anywhere else. Maybe that leads to more perverted ideas and thoughts, but the actual depictions are more censored. On top of that, the showing of internal organs, gore, is also, if not illegal, incredibly frowned upon in Japan. So that too has been censored out. In that, you see that in Resident Evil games and zombie games too, is that you'll get black clouds over disembodied corpses instead of seeing the guts and disembowelment. That mostly goes back to World War II and disembowelments in particular that the Japanese were either doing to themselves or others. And I think I've forgotten the third thing that was censored. It wasn't particularly long list considering how big Baldur's Gate 3 is, but it is certainly interesting to point out that yes, censorship is happening in both directions. not just Japanese games being censored for the American audience. See, Ultigram is going to update Warcraft Rumble credits after it omitted contractors. It's nice to see that we're making it and maintaining momentum on the push to force contractors to actually credit people, or at least try to force contractors to be credited. It's a good first step, but it really is just a first step, and it's taken decades to get to this point. A ratings board has revealed new details on the unannounced Silent Hill: The Short Message. It's an exploration-based psychological horror game featuring depictions of suicide and self-harm. Noticeably, I would say this Silent Hill game probably in no way connected to the other Silent Hill interactive story experience that happened around Halloween, and nobody has said anything about it other than the user interface looked awful, which is what I had to say about it looking at a screenshot of it too. So whatever the story was around that, I'm not sure very many people even engaged with it. It definitely is not adding anything to the Silent Hill canon at this moment. Let's see, a former Kotaku staffers launched an independent game and cultural website called Aftermath. The worker-owned publication was co-founded by Nathan Grayson, Gita Jackson, Riley McLeod, and Luke Plunkett. I don't know any of these people by name, and inherently you have Kotaku as a red flag here as a problem. In that Kotaku was one of the most extreme SJW sites by the time I finally stopped looking at their articles and caring about what they had to say. So my concern, just because of Kotaku and that red flag, is that this is former employees who are either even more SJW-y than what Kotaku could handle, or Kotaku maybe even went out of business and I just didn't hear about it. I think Kotaku's probably still around though. They want $7 a month for access to all articles and bonus podcast episodes, which is an extremely high amount of money to ask for a brand new video game website. That is really, really high. I don't even know what the right price would be. I'd say maybe $1 a month. I could see $12 a month for a website. Also, they're saying that you have to have $100 a year to get access to commenting in a community Discord server and regular staff Q&As, which is ridiculous. So even if they're not SJW-y, they're incredibly insane as far as the prices go. Like these are high elite, coastal elite prices to expect. I don't particularly like the name Aftermath. Its logo here looks terrible. I can't even really read this. Like, this could have been an O, this could be a C, this is supposed to be an R here, but then this is an M with the exact same logo. But yeah, terrible pink background as far as the color. Yeah. If I'm lucky, I'll never hear another word about this website, Aftermath. If I'm unlucky, I'll start hearing several Aftermath articles that are just extremely ridiculous SJW nonsense, Gamergate nonsense type articles. And if I do hear about it, almost certainly it's going to be coming from GameDeveloper.com, which noticeably is more than willing to promote another potential competitor to them, whereas I imagine several other sites wouldn't bother to promote some new startup competitor. Here's more weirdness on Nintendo's part. Nintendo apparently denies briefing developers on the Switch 2 and dismisses the multi-screen patent. The president claims the company didn't brief Activision on its next-gen console plans, although inherently they may not have briefed Activision, but they may have briefed other people. But to come out and straight up say the media reports are untrue, if it gets proven to be true, is a weird hole to dig yourself into. And then the whole clamshell pattern, I think, is probably something to dismiss as far as a multi-screen. But yeah. To come out and directly deny something is very much a strong response. Something that you probably would be better to just say no comment on, and they had been consistently not commenting on it now. But it does seem like it gives off this air of desperation that they're afraid people are just going to hold off this Christmas season and not buy any Switches and not buy any video games, and they really want that sales to happen. So they're doing everything to squash that idea. I did hear, and it's an interesting thought, I guess, of people effectively doing something I would call pre-order drop shipping, in that at least one site has put out a Switch 2 listing to be pre-ordered for $450 without knowing any details or having any pictures or description for it. Which at a certain level, I could see doing that. I could see even having some value add in which you have a nice little card you send them to say, this is a receipt for your pre-order for this, and you can put the card in an envelope and put it under your Christmas tree. Particularly around Christmas, I could see making coupons effectively for things that aren't out there. And you could do it certainly for the next Nintendo console, but you could also do it for the next iPhone and the next MacBook or iPad. Just as long as you're willing to gamble and take pre-orders at the highest level, and you could probably piss off a few people and even cancel pre-orders if you didn't have the price high enough. You could certainly take the money now, and then when the next Switch comes out, just pre-order it with that money that you were given, and you would be making interest off of and have that directly shipped to the person who pre-ordered. Now, inherently, there probably is some laws around taking a pre-order and not delivering on something after like 12 months. So you probably wouldn't want to go too far in the future as one concern. But overall, there's really no law in the United States to say you have to have the product in hand or have any kind of special relationship to guarantee you would have access to the product. You could definitely take pre-orders for things. I don't know how many people would take you up on it, but probably enough if you can advertise well. GameStop certainly could do this way better than some random individual shop drop shipper. But yeah, it is an interesting idea, and it certainly highlights that if I was thinking of giving a kid a new Switch 2 when it comes out, now might be the time to just give them a coupon. And honestly, I still do think that the best thing you could do any Christmas is to give a kid one, maybe two new games right now, and then give them coupons for 3 or 4 games throughout the year and say, hey, you're going to space this out and you'll get the games when they come out, when you really want it to come out. Don't give them money that they'll just spend on candy or something else that is adaptable. Give them just coupons, effectively IOUs. It comes off as a little bit bad. Lots of parents do a similar thing. Certainly, they buy less Christmas presents now for because they know throughout the year they're also buying gifts for their kids, and kids don't tend to understand that that's what's going on, and parents tend not to explain it that way. But yeah, this Christmas in particular is not likely to have any big video game thing under the tree, like no new consoles, and there are some decent new games, but no major in-demand games. Moving on, We have an article here. The Final Fantasy VII writer asks fans to stop demanding that he kill off certain characters. Quote, I don't want to block or mute too many of you, says Kazushi Nojima on Twitter. One of the key writers in the series has asked fans to stop demanding that he kill off characters they don't like. Which, yeah. I question if the rabid fandom in particular around some of these is not more of the Japanese audience than the Western audience, particularly in the case of Final Fantasy. While Final Fantasy VII is somewhat popular in the West, it is mostly an Eastern product, first and foremost. I imagine in Final Fantasy VII, the big spoiler of killing off one character in particular from your team is likely to happen, although it doesn't inherently have to happen, and it might be a nice twist to go the other way. But if you don't kill off anybody, that would be interesting, but not that interesting. If you killed off a different character on the team, that would be an interesting twist, but you'd almost have to kill off the main protagonist, which, yeah, maybe you do that, but probably not. Just not kill off anybody and make that be the big twist. The twist is that there is no twist. The killing off of a main character in Final Fantasy originally only made sense as a twist because it killed off a character who had items equipped that you lost those items when that character died, and up until that point Final Fantasy games really hadn't killed off main protagonists. Nowadays I think we should live in a world where characters could die or not die in video games, and that's just fairly common. Getting back to the idea of Mass Effect in particular, there's a lot of characters that can be injured or killed at the end of Mass Effect 2, I believe. I watched that movie Renfield, and in that there was a whole bunch of characters that were killed and then they brought back at the end of the movie using Dracula's blood, which Renfield as a movie had a lot more violence and gore and action in it than I was expecting. You really wouldn't expect a Renfield movie to be a action flick. Like, there was a TV series around Renfield that was much better around that idea. And yeah, Nicolas Cage playing Dracula is just too wild and crazy, even for Dracula as a character. I think I'd have to go back and see if Nicolas Cage ever consistently stays in character, even as a crazy person. I think he probably has always been just way too out of it and way too inconsistent, to the point where even if you're going to have him play a crazy Dracula character, he's not consistent even in that. Anyways, I'm supposed to be talking about video games though. We had a Video Games Chronicle thing. Apparently a new Burnout game on the Switch eShop has nothing to do with the EA series. I imagine the phrase Burnout can't be trademarked or copyrighted. Which, yeah. Imagine things like that probably should happen even more. Yeah, I don't know why they have Shigeru Miyamoto as their banner art at Video Games Chronicle. Take-Two suggested that GTA 6 won't be held up because of the SAG-AFTRA strike. Which, yeah. I don't know if there was something specific here I clicked on, or if this is just a tab that was left open. I think this was probably just a tab that was left open, because there's not really anything special. Apparently, the Tintin game has told players that the game release day that it isn't good enough and will take weeks to patch. To those who play the game at launch, won't be able to enjoy the experience as we intend it to be. That's an interesting statement to make while not really fixing anything. First footage of Hogwarts Legacy has been shared. Sony has released a new live-action PS5 trailer to kick off its holiday season marketing campaign. Final Fantasy creator Hironobu Sakaguchi has started work on a new project. These tweets are not full articles, that's part of it too. Probably clicked on this as far as the Zero Punctuation creator Ben Yahtzee Croshaw and former Escapist editor-in-chief Nick Caldera have announced their next adventure, Second Wind, which, yeah, it is disingenuous really when it's just those two people to say this is former Escapist staff. While that's technically true, it's really ignoring a significant number of other people who were former Escapist staff. Of course, that's the problem in general with all apparently Half-Life would have been called Crisis or Fallout. I assume Half-Life 1 would have come out before a game called Crisis or Fallout already existed. And you can see on Twitter here, you're kind of going in circles too. Which highlights how it's not really worth it to scroll down people's individual Twitter feed for that whole mess. And then our final big bit of news is Nintendo has refused to comment, at least refusing the comment may have been a comment, or maybe they just actually refused to say anything on next-gen plans as the Switch clears 132 million. The company has so far sold more consoles this year than it did in previous years. And we can see best-selling game list here, if that's helpful in any way. It's probably interesting to also consider that if they are making a Mario movie and a Zelda movie now, this might be a shifting away from making so many Pokemon movies, of which Nintendo only owns a part of the Pokemon company, not all of it. And Pokemon in general not being particularly high quality or that good lately, and the Pokemon movies not adding too much to that idea. Of course, looking at this list, you have Mario Party and Mario Kart, and I doubt there will be movies exclusively around those concepts, where a Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom movies might be exactly what they do. Breath of the Wild and then sequel Zelda movie retelling the story of Tears of the Kingdom. Although at a certain level it might be better if they told a new story. Yep, I'm not sure my macro particularly ran correctly, because either it's a case that a whole bunch of new games just got on the chart, or the data points got messed up again. I'd already gone back and removed one day's worth of data points. Well, I'm wondering if now I'm probably going to have to do it once again and just get the chart back to where it is. It's either that's the case, or it's a case that there's just no new data for the finals playtest because it's been removed, which is possible. And we're seeing some weird high burst here in PUBG, which that actually does make sense. because PUBG might be in parallel with the Fortnite return. That kind of makes some sense. So maybe I should just leave the data as it is and assume that this finals playtest is here. As far as overall trend goes, though, you can see a general falling as far as the number of gamers playing games, which I imagine we might see more of that, in particular as the maybe Modern Warfare game gets played more, or people just get busy with other things with the holidays. Again, we are not at a point here where there's really any sales going on. The Mass Effect Legendary Edition is on sale for $9.59. I assume, though, it includes single player base content and over 40 DLCs from the highly acclaimed Mass Effect, Mass Effect 2, and Mass Effect 3 games. So, this is the kind of remastered, let's put it all together as one product Mass Effect trilogy, hoping you pretty much ignore the other versions in Mass Effect Andromeda. At a certain level, there is this argument, particularly at that cheaper price of only $10, to play Mass Effect compared to playing the Halo Master Chief Collection. There's just more time and commitment there. Although in all fairness, I think one of these is an RPG game with some visual novel elements, Mass Effect is, whereas Halo Master Chief Edition is really a run and gun shooter game, so it's a very different experience. But if there was only one of the two I would play, I think I might be tempted to play Mass Effect because it would just take less time in the long run. Although it may not really. I probably could just rush on easy through the Halo Master Chief Collection and say, alright, I've played it now, let's move on with life. I'm not sure that I'd even enjoy it or even care to play it, either one of them. Alright, moving on to the Video Games Chronicle articles. My macro as far as putting these interstitial screenshots still is messed up like crazy. I'm not sure if maybe there is just no way to get it to work. Which, it'd be crazy if there's no way to get it to work, but I'm not also focusing on reprogramming my macros while I'm also focusing on programming a smart on-air sign. It's just too much programming and too much distraction, particularly when I should be getting back to making YouTube footage, which I'm not accomplishing at this rate. If anything, I'm effectively taking an entire month off, some of which of what I was taking off also, because I was running a macro on Tuesday, I started doing a Lego set, which is catching up. I need to do that too. I was doing the Christmas Lego set I got about 2 years ago, so it's crazy to have a Lego set sitting around for over a year, but I definitely have quite a few that I need to catch up on and no free time to do them. Although in all fairness, if I can automate the YouTube Shorts, that takes several hours. That's a good time to do a Lego set and take a break. Apparently, Take-Two actors say GTA 6 is completely protected from a potential actor strike, but Rockstar's parent company is optimistic about reaching an agreement in upcoming negotiations. I assume they mean that they are totally willing to hire scabs or work outside of a country, that SAG-AFTRA is only like the United States anyway, so they'll work just in a scab country that doesn't have union protections with scab actors, or they'll bring in AI voice acting or something. I would say GTA as a game series is almost certainly not as protected as they want people to think they are. this is a attempt to sound that like they are in a position of strength. When you think about GTA games, there's a lot of voice acting, and it needs to be fairly good. So if they can't get good actors, if they try to cheap out, if they got rid of voice acting altogether, that would almost certainly ruin GTA 6. Let's see. Take-Two's boss says that AI can be used to make NPCs really interesting and fun. Strauss-Zelnick thinks scripted NPCs are generally not very interesting. Inherently, aren't NPCs, non-playable characters, for the most part supposed to be boring background actors instead of being interesting characters that you're interacting with? Yes, there's an occasional character you should talk to, like a shopkeeper or a quest giver or something like that, that should be somewhat interesting, but generally, even in those cases, you just want to get the quest or you do your shopping and move on. You don't want to go into long diatribes telling you their backstory and all that nonsense. Like, people are very ADHD in a lot of cases, and the idea of NPCs all of a sudden having distracting, interesting games creates this danger of having very distracting video games in general, where players with ADD, ADHD, or people that just suffer from being easily distracted get taken off the main path and are just wandering around, and then eventually they're going to look up at the clock and realize they've spent several hours wandering around the city and they haven't accomplished anything, and they're not that interested, they're not that happy in their lack of progress, and that they haven't moved the main story forward. You can have some of that, certainly, but not too much of it. If you could just have random ADHD gameplay with no purpose, then Minecraft, the biggest selling game ever, wouldn't have added quests in the end, and there wouldn't be so many mods that add more of a goal to Minecraft. But yeah, this is, again, I assume, a case of Strauss-Zelnick just trying to promote AI. Fun is the operative word there, I suppose, and I just don't really believe them that AI can make character NPCs fun. Particularly when you're starting to think about like GTA, where the most fun you've ever had around GTA as far as NPC characters was to run them over in cars or shoot them or like kidnap them, punch them, things like that. They are effectively just things to harm for fun. That's as much as people have ever done with GTA games and NPCs. We already talked about this one. I imagine a lot of these we have talked about. Starfield's Deep Learning Super Sampling update is launched in Steam Beta. The patch also adds the ability to consume food and drink item upon finding them, which is a very simplistic improvement that should have been there day one. I do suspect Starfield might be a decent game a year from now, or longer. By the time I got around to playing it, it might be a very decent game, but it may just not have the longevity or the impact of something like Skyrim, so it may not be really worth it to play Starfield if you've already played Skyrim. Just think Skyrim in space, and that may be what Starfield is to a lot of people. We already talked about the Black Friday day and the update and this and this and this. Apparently Steel Series is selling an $80 Artisan Modern Warfare 3 keycap. $80 for that. It's quite a lot. GTA trailer is coming. Nintendo, we talked about this. The Crunchyroll Games Vault adds an ad-free mobile games to the anime streaming platform. Mega and Ultimate fan members have access to the growing library. None of these games seem amazing. You have River City Girls on mobile, And so that's one, I would say. But then these other 4 that are being shown don't look like anything. Captain Velvet Meteor, The Jump Dimensions, never heard of it. Wolf Stride, never heard of it. Behind the Frame, The Finest Scenery, never heard of it. And then Invento, never heard of it. At the very least, compared to the new Kotaku website, paying $8 a month to remove ads and watch simulcast episodes on the same day as Japan on Crunchyroll, plus giving access to Crunchyroll's digital manga library, which I didn't realize they even had that, is much more reasonable a price, because you're basically paying for a niche anime Netflix at that price compared to just paying for a Kotaku ripoff website, or website similar to Kotaku. But to play the video games, you have to cough up $10, which is still not that much, because it gives you offline viewing, access to 4 concurrent streams. I'm not sure if you really need that. But then I guess maybe that means you can split it between 4 people, although maybe you can only split it between 4 people in the same house. And then access to the Crunchyroll Games Vault. Definitely is a value add right now when you only have 5 games. But it, on another level, makes a little bit more sense than Netflix gaming does, because most people who are watching anime probably also would play mobile games. I think considerably fewer percentage of people who watch Netflix are going to watch Netflix on their cell phone or play video games on their cell phone. We already talked about this one and this one. Apparently Pikmin 4 is now the best selling game in the series. Yeah, that's believable. It very well may just be the momentum of there being more gamers now for Pikmin 4 than any other of the Pikmin games. Let's see, we already talked about this. We already talked about Epic Games Store not being unprofitable. We talked about it in the last stream. And so most of these articles going forward, I bet, are old articles, which I haven't looked into why the macro is still opening old articles, but whatever. It went back very, very far here as far as old articles from Video Games Chronicles. Yeah. Apparently Christmas Massacre is not being allowed on Nintendo or Microsoft's storefronts, which it looks like garbage, so can't really complain too much about that, can I? Spider-Man 2 creative director once again references Daredevil. Let's see, most of this is still stuff we already talked about. Last of Us multiplayer director says he's still working on the project. The game was reportedly scaled back earlier this year. I'd kind of forgotten completely that they were making a Last of Us multiplayer game. Almost certainly it's going to be cancelled or turned into some other game. It doesn't even really make sense to have a multiplayer game called The Last of Us. And we talked about that, so yeah. A lot of old stories here. We're moving over to the Gamatsu articles. Risk of Rain Hostile Worlds has been announced for iOS and Android as, I guess, yet another spin-off Risk of Rain game. Super Crazy Rhythm Castle has an explainer trailer if you want to check that out on Gamatsu. Giga Bash DLC Ultraman 4 Characters Pack is now available. Which, yeah. Not sure I have figured out if you can highlight DLC. And particularly in this case, Ultraman, popular certainly amongst a certain age of Japanese fans, but completely unknown to Western fans. See if I can make a YouTube short around that or not. Hashtag Drive Rally has been announced for all consoles and PC. We're kind of late to the party as far as announcement of new games. We're getting too close to Black Friday, and after Black Friday it's really crazy to be announcing anything. Alone in the Dark Looking for Jeremy trailer is available if you want to check that out. Announcement for the trailer of GTA 6. The Famitsu review scores for issue 1823 are available, giving this longly listed title for the Switch 28 out of 40. Just Dance 20 out of 2024, which that game came out with no fanfare, 31 out of 40. Momotaro Densetsu World being given a 35 out of 40, that's pretty high. Persona 5 or Persona 5 Tacticia getting a 33 out of 40. And then Yohane the Pantheon Blaze in the Deep Blue getting a 30 out of 40. So not anything amazingly highly rated other than Momotaro Densetsu World for the Switch. Which maybe this game, may not. Here you can see Persona 5 Tacticia still putting out trailers for each individual character. Super Mario Bros. Wonder sales have topped 4.3 million. That's a big number, not name. Noticeably, not that many people really saying anything about the game. Which maybe that is the future here, is that we will just have people buying games, enjoying games, saying, yeah, we liked it, and then that's it. Which, that feels a little subdued. I would like to see the praises of games that are being well received and liked happen more often. And that has always been a problem with like mainstream video game journalists, is that they may play a game, but they may not want to promote it, so they'll just say, yeah, we like it, instead of doing a full article, which they should do, or a full review. Legend of Zelda live action film announced. A lot of a Zelda movie noticeably will come down to the clothing style, and if you're going with the blue Breath of the Wild clothing style, that's not going to look much like Zelda to me. But like, this character really strikes me as not really being Zelda. It's some elf girl with long blonde hair, and yes, I know it is Zelda from Breath of the Wild, but she just doesn't have that Ocarina of Time like dress and outfit on, and nor does Link have the Ocarina of Time green tunic on, and so the whole thing just comes off like these are the imposter Zeldas and imposter Links. And I think I'd only feel that more in a live action movie. Let's see, the next Mass Effect day in 7 Day 2023 has a teaser trailer, which, yeah, I guess you can check that out on Komatsu if you care. Apparently a game called Revenant Hill has been cancelled. Sometimes things happen beyond your control that change the available options, and you just have to roll with them. This is interesting to just come out and say your game is cancelled. And you can see, here's a great example of what happens when your game gets removed, either by you or by Steam, from Steam, is it just links you back to the main page. I wouldn't be surprised if Konami is such a jerk that they will sue any game whatsoever that has Hill in the name. Hills, Silent Hills. If I think about it, there are pretty much no game I can think of that has Hill in the name other than Silent Hill. And I can't think of a game that really even has silent in the name as the first word, at least. So this may very well be threats of lawsuits. Enshrouded launches in early access on January 24th of 2022. So it's a game that's already on the follow list, yes. Let's see, Valfaris Mecha Therion launches November 21st for PC, and then in 2024 for the PS5 and 4 and the Xbox One and Series and Switch. Let's see. We're trying to burn through the Gematsu articles as fast as possible, although you can only go so fast as pages don't want to load. One of the things about my Smart On Air site, Lite, is that there's just a certain level of testing I can only do. Like, there's only 3 days a week that I can live stream and see if I've got the code good so that it will light up when I'm live streaming. Right now it is working. Like, it is lit up in its temporary state. It's lighting up an LED where in the future it will light up in an entire array of LEDs. This just does not want to load at all, does it? Just go ahead and reload. But yeah, 3 days a week, even if I started to power through and make footage and was recording and then stopping and recording, I could do 10-20 different instances as far as testing the same thing. For the most part, if it works the first time, it'll work the second time for me. But then you start to throw out other ideas. Like, I only have an Android phone, so the setup webpage, Captive Portal webpage that it has, I can only really test on my one Android phone. Who's to say that it looks awful, it doesn't work on an iPhone, or works completely different on a different Android phone. Like, my phone does work completely different than even other people's Android phones in a lot of instances. And at a certain point, I'm just going to throw it out there and say no refunds, no take backsies, as it were, which is terrible business. A terrible business plan, certainly, but for a small time creator programmer, last thing I need to interact with is all of a sudden people saying it doesn't work, wanting refunds, refusing to return the product, and still wanting a refund, claiming they never got the product and wanting a refund. Like, so all kinds of things like that can happen, and some of it can be true as far as shipping being a big issue. But yeah, when you don't have that economy of scale, when you don't have that protection, when you don't have $1 million in seed money to protect you from things, one bad customer can wreck a product launch or cause you a lot of frustration. Anyways, sorry, I got sidetracked as the page was trying to load. Apparently, Lords of the Fallen free content roadmap has been announced. This is quite a lot of pictures. If this is all free content, it's a nice way to make an announcement, but it does dangerously get close to a grid of what we usually see of how many different pre-orders and premium versions of DLC do you have to order to get everything. But that's not what this is. This is just a very pretty, nicely laid out announcement of free content. Of course, you're also making a ton of promises here, and if you fail to deliver on even one of them, somebody's going to be upset. The Silent Hill: The Short Message plot was leaked via the Australian classification, in part. Capcom Platinum title sales update as of September 30th of 2023. Yeah, they have a long list of games saying that Capcom Arcade Second Stadium is sold 1.1 million units, where the rest of these are just updates on several kind of older games selling fairly well. And at a certain point, like the Resident Evil 4 remake, you have to be careful to not confuse that with, say, Resident Evil 4, which should also be on this list fairly high, and yet it isn't. this isn't the full list. That's why. Capcom is kind of unique in that they announce the games that sell over a certain amount, but then they also kind of stop at a certain point too. I don't think they're naming every single game, and inherently they are leaning heavily on some major successes from a long time ago. Final Fight 2 here from 1993, or Mega Man 3 for the NES from 1990. Having that on their list as far as the top games that sold over 1 million. And certainly selling Mega Man 3 for 1.08 million units being sold in 1990 is way bigger of an achievement than selling 4 or 5 million in 2023, where there's a way larger audience of video gamers out there. The Resident Evil 4 remake for Mac, iPhone, and iPad launches in December 20th, which I imagine that's not the place to play that game. It does make a lot of sense nobody's really talking about Resident Evil 4 anymore, but it would be kind of nice if there was a little bit more hype on it, because I feel like either they have not released the Separate Ways DLC yet, or they just recently released the Separate Ways DLC and it didn't get enough fanfare in my opinion. But at a certain point, this is also the new world of gaming, in which the gaming audience is much more diverse, and we're not all going to play Resident Evil 4 and all play it at the same time. Switch worldwide sales have topped 132.46 million, and Pikmin has topped 2.6 million units sold. I assume these are units sold and not dollars. Which, yeah, there's something perhaps to be said about the highest selling Pikmin game really only selling about 2%, probably less than 2% of its entire console base. Like, if everybody who owned these 132 million Switches all bought one copy of Pikmin 4, then there should be 132 million copies sold. But that's not super surprising. You could easily cut this number into about a third and assume that a lot of people are buying their second or third Switches, and then even at that, if that got you to about 40 million, then the number still seems fairly in line, 40 million to 2 million Pikmin 4 sales, because Pikmin is very much a niche real-time strategy game with not a good mascot character. Like, they've really failed to make the Pikmin stand out as supposed to be the mascot character, or make the player stand out as being the mascot character. There probably should have been a spin-off Pikmin game after the second or third game that turned it into more of an action experience and told more of a story, and then the real-time strategy aspects of Pikmin should be in the main game series, but then every now and then you'd have a different kind of spin-off game that would try to bring in a different kind of audience. Let's see, Shinjuku Soumei launches February 2024 for PC. It's a new visual novel from Gmode and Plus 81. Let's see if we've already got that on the fall list. Nope. We'll put it on the fall list. Not really seeing too much here. Almost feels like you're playing as this girl dealing with her father and mother. Yep. It's questionable what the narrative even here is. It's not very good screenshots for a visual novel. King of Fighters 15's DLC character Hinako Shijo launches November 14th. I assume that's this lady. Like a Dragon Gaiden, the man who erased his name has a Meet Kazuma Kiryu trailer. The narrative-based action platformer Always in Mind has been announced for PC. I believe we already made a short around that. Yes. And then Ninja Ishin launches November 23rd for PC and in 2024 for Switch. Now these last four articles in particular were out of order when my macro opened them, and I don't know why. That's the weirdness, is that you'll just have things slightly out of order and the browser just acts differently for some reason. Sympathy Kiss launches February 27th in the West. This looks like this is a otome visual novel, young maiden visual novel. No link to Steam, if it is coming to Steam. Nope, it looks like it's only coming to the Switch. I suppose if there was somebody out there who legitimately had a problem with women or teenager girls reading romance novels, they might have a problem with otome visual novels. But yeah, I think you would probably be a pretty big control freak if you had a problem with people reading, girls or boys reading romance novels. If anything, if you can get a kid to read anything, by all means let them. Anything short of like a Hustler magazine, who cares? Like, particularly if it's just words. Let's see. We already basically talked about this. As far as refusing to be bound by the traditional concept of a platform life cycle. Like, assuming the next console can play Switch games at all, like, Nintendo will inevitably feel the pressure, unless they just refuse to feel that pressure, to put all of their new games on the next console to promote the sales of the next console once it's announced. It would be very weird for Nintendo to uniquely still release games on the Switch and also on a Switch 2, unless it's just backwards compatible. Anyways, effectively that would mean that Nintendo is giving up console exclusivity to itself for the Switch 1, which would make it less necessary to buy the Switch 2. There might be a hardware issue here too, though. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they're expecting it to be kind of a struggle to get a Switch 2. It just won't be available and the demand will be too high, and so maybe they're saying if you can get a Switch 2, you're going to be one of the lucky few, and as such the vast majority of our player base will still be playing on the Switch 1, and that's our market that we're going to serve. And the people who are early adopters on the Switch 2 are not really going to be our market. Here's Rockstar Game to announce the GTA as early as this week being updated to say they actually did announce it. There'd been rumors for weeks that they were going to announce a GTA game, but yeah, nobody was really reporting on the rumors. That brings us to the GameDeveloper.com articles, which I think we mostly talked about this. Mortal Kombat 1 has fought its way through to nearly 3 million copies sold, which it's kind of shocking. You compare 2 million of Pikmin 4 to 3 million copies of Mortal Kombat 1. Mortal Kombat 1 should have way more copies being sold, but the problem there is there's just not any enthusiasm for what is effectively the 12th Mortal Kombat game in a series that has effectively sold the same game over and over again and not revitalized itself in any way. Yes, the soft reboot of calling it Mortal Kombat 1 was an idea, but didn't seem to really matter too much in the long run. Nobody came out with any reviews of Mortal Kombat 1 and said this game is completely different than any of the previous Mortal Kombat games. It's going in a bold new direction. This is the one to play and start the journey all over again. There's been no reviews like that at all, and so I assume the game is not like that at all. Yeah, we already talked about GTA. Submissions for Game Maker's Sketchbook at GDC 2024 are now open. It's important to point out that GameDeveloper.com is a sister company to the Game Developer Conference. I already talked about this. Apparently the Morbius producer is going to be in charge of the live-action Zelda movie, which that doesn't sound good by any means. Although it kind of doesn't mean anything either, because the producer could change at the drop of a hat, and while producers sound like they're in charge, they can easily not be in charge of making movies. There can always be an executive producer, or Nintendo can have a strong hand in what gets made and how it gets produced. We already talked about this. I talked about this. So that would bring me to the fall list cleanup, but it didn't run. But for 2 games. This is an interesting looking game that just came out, so it needs more time. And then this is one that's on the fall list, but I probably would say no to it just because of the art style. Yeah, again, no real telling why there was only 2, but I suspect in that case it's because another plugin was not enabled when it should have been, and so it was probably opening the tabs on top of each other instead of opening each link in its own separate new tab, which, yeah, that can happen if things get out of order with the macro programming. And I had changed the code as far as all the new games on Steam. So I changed it specifically to look for 2 markers of the latest games that we had looked at in the last stream. And in doing that, that changed how the values are saved in the comma separated values. Originally it would have been there was only 1 column for one name of a game. Now there's 2 columns for each row for 2 names of games, which means I had to go and change the comma separated value save file to adjust for that, and I didn't do it on the first time when I ran the macro, but then I realized that was the problem, and then I did it on the second time, and as such that the macro ran. But I did have to kind of make up where the markers were, so I just picked some games that looked like we'd already looked at in the last stream. This game was already on the fall list, so I'm going to go ahead and put it on the wish list. This is a Gearbox publishing game, so that might be bringing in some money for Embracer Group. Gunhead is already on the fall list. This doesn't look like anything. This is Doomsday Paradise. It's a game that I put on the fall list quite a while ago, and it's finally just getting released. It's kind of a dating simulator monster game. I don't think we're anywhere close, though, that I would make another YouTube short around the game just because it's out now. I think you basically get one until you put out some interesting DLC or something, and then maybe I'll make another YouTube short around a game because of that. 2-hour escape puzzling game. I'm gonna give this a chance. I'll even make a short around it. Saturnalia. It's an interesting purplish art style to it. Lunatics. Looks like it's probably a VR game. I'll give it a chance. Let's see. Dark Invasion VR Doomsday. I think we can say no to that. Alright, so far so good today, but I do have this fear that I'm gonna go through a bunch of games today and end up having to take a break in the last hour and last second. We've got a visual novel, I'll give it a chance. Super Picture Cross. I'll give it a chance. I'm probably a little bit mentally drained as far as making decisions, but I honestly don't feel like I'm that mentally drained. While we're going through these games, I can still talk about the cell phone games I'm still playing. Lower Decks, making progress there, but I kind of feel like by this time next week I'll have either figured out that you can ascend in Star Trek Lower Decks, and at whatever the ascension is, it starts everything over, or I've just gonna be tapped out to the point where there's no new content to see. But then weirdly, Star Trek Lower Decks still will have near daily events to justify. This is an interesting art style. It's already on the follow list though. To justify going back. The adult game Tinkafuma. It's giving me, I think right now, a bit of a breather to try and catch up on the main story and level up characters. But I do see a point in 3 months or so potentially being full on that content too. But they have monthly enough events too. Da Vinci Cryptics. Is the game worth it? What is this? $3.34 just to do a Da Vinci Cryptics puzzle. I'm gonna put this on the follow list, but I'm not gonna make a short on it. Here we have an adult game, 3D CGI game called Lucky One, which, yeah, visual novel. Seems like it's just a guy getting it on with some girls. $5.09. It says it supports English, Chinese, and Russian in the interface and subtitles, no voice acting. And like so many other 3D CGI visual novels, they just all look exactly the same. And then the other adult game on my cell phone, 7 Mortal Sins. It has way too much events going to it, but I have gone back to it and continuing to try and just catch up and see if I can see the whole story. Which, by the time I finish the story, I'll probably at that point be able to determine whether I want to stick with 7 Mortal Sins Ecstasy. The main game I'm trying to play and being unable to play the most is still Memento Mori, just because the game gatekeeps, and it's just I'm not getting enough resources to take it to the next level. I'm hoping that by the week happens, by the end of a week, I will have made some progress. Otherwise, there is a real danger in Memento Mori in that you just stop making progress, or you don't make progress enough to justify going back to it 2 or 3 times a day. Like, it really is at a point where once a day might be all you really need, or all I really need now at Memento Mori, because until I get those daily rewards for logging in and those daily quests, I'm just not getting any resources at all that are worth mentioning, and so I can't summon more characters. And because I can't summon more characters, I can't get anywhere. This is a free game. It says it's academic version. I'm gonna put this on the follow list and see if people review it, but actually looking at it though, it doesn't look like enough of a thing to interest me. Here we have another adult game called Sweet Beauties. This time it is 2D characters, colorful hairstyles, but I would say this probably is more of a Russian animation style than anything. Tall, lengthy ladies, big, relatively bigger than medium boobs. I guess slightly large boobs, not huge, and then fairly big thighs, but not really. If anything, I'd say they're probably medium on everything. Sweet Beauties is $1.59. It's English only, so maybe Russian art style is better described as just Western art style, and it's just a memory game. I'd say there's something lacking in the face animations. It's not quite as good as you would want it to be. Here we have Anger of Peace 5, which I suspect heavily there is not a 1 through 4 on Steam. Looks like a garbage asset flip first-person shooter. And then we have a interesting pencil sketch visual novel type game. As the first official work of the Parallel Caesar series, they're really ambitious, aren't they? $11.69 English and Chinese. I'll give it a chance. But yeah, this is very much a pencil style with a thick black inking on the edges. This character stands out from the background quite a bit. Feels very manga-esque, but not like a traditional manga as much as somebody who could draw a comic book or his style of art's trying to make it look like a manga by desaturating it. I could definitely see that this background could have just been a stock image of a background and they just took all the color out, because you're seeing a lot of shadowing and shading on the background here, whereas there is a very strict limitation on how much shadowing and shading they're bothering to do on the character, which, yeah, that's creates a very distinctively different visual aesthetic when you have black and white and maybe a few shades of gray versus black and white and hundreds of shades of gray. We have another adult game called Fresh Story, 3D CGI visual novel. Seems to me like this one goes into a lot of places. We have a lady doing a lot of different activities in a lot of different locations, going for several fetishes: public exposure, cosplay, stripper, bunny girl, submission in part, making her get on her knees and scrub the floors while molesting her in an office while somebody else is talking to her. Yeah, quite a few fetishes there. $3.99 English and Russian. This is Fresh Story is the name of it. That tag NTR, which I've always just understood to mean cheating. I heard another YouTuber claim that NTR is more of a you're cheating with a high chance of being caught, or you're cheating with a high chance that, or you're cheating with the husband aware that you're cheating. You're trying to make your husband or significant other aware that you're cheating, getting somewhat into the idea of like cuckoldry, which it in itself, that is also a different tag. I would probably have to pick the brain of a Japanese person or sample several Japanese people to get their true definition of what NTR stands for. I think in general cheating makes a lot of sense. To just stick with that idea as the definition. But it is kind of silly to have two different phrases to mean the same thing, but one of those phrases is also Japanese in NTR, so in the Japanese language is kind of full of slight subtle differences in how you might interpret a phrase, and I'm not even sure the Japanese know the true meanings of some phrases as much as they understand it to mean one thing amongst themselves and a small group of their friends and family. Of course, that's true for the English language too. There's a lot of things where the definitions slightly shift. Yeah, I think we're gonna say no to Yeti free. Not quite polished enough. I think we're gonna say no to Sushi Man. Definitely gonna say no to Block Jump. Noria. One of the things, as we're looking at games and as I'm describing and looking at the adult games, is that there's definitely a new argument that came to my mind to never get away from looking at the adult games, unless, of course, YouTube has a problem with it, which so far they haven't. Fingers crossed. But maybe my brain is broken. I'll leave it to other people to assume that or not, but when I go back and look at games and try to remember which games we've talked about, if I need to go back and find a marker, almost 100% chance the game I'm going to remember from the previous stream is going to be an adult game. I spend more time on them, I look at it, they're more relatable as humans being in the screenshots, and they're just more exotic and wild as an idea. So they stick in my brain a little bit more. There is always that joke about men thinking about sex every 7 seconds of the day, and while it's not true, it is possible that there are some people out there, and I might be one of them, that is bringing the average up. Of course, I'm also in a very unique position. Like, I'm not having to sit in a classroom for 8 hours or work in an office for 8 hours. If I was, and back when I was not certainly as free to think about or talk about things as much as I am now, and that's one of the beauties of being your own boss. Is it may not pay to be a YouTuber, but at least you control your life a little bit more. Gives you a little bit more of that freedom. I guess Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2 goes on the wish list already. This is a typing game, but I'm fairly certain this typing game would not actually help people get better at typing, because it's a bullet hell game where you're typing while you shoot, and it definitely seems like really you're just hitting a bunch of W's and a bunch of E's and Q's, and it's not really asking you to type in words. Yeah, it's an interesting pun of a title though, typecast. But yeah, I would have to say it is WASD friendly as far as where the letters are, and that makes it not a good typing game, and that doesn't make it a better top-down twin-stick shooter survivors game. So I'm going to say no to that. There we can see Little Goody Two Shoes is increasing to get positive reviews, but it already had decent reviews, so it was already on the wish list. I guess it just came out of early access very quickly. Lucky Dungeon. Don't think that's polished enough. Stronghold Definitive Edition. It's already on the fall list. A lot of games already on the fall list. I imagine some of this may have to do with the fact that they've already been announced. Pretty much everything's already been announced. Yeah, that would be my guess as to most of the reason. Here's the Tintin games getting very poor reviews. Yeah, from now to the new year, we may just see considerably high numbers of games that already are on the fall list, which means maybe from now to new year, it means I don't have to make as many YouTube shorts. And the last quarter, the Christmas season of every year, may be the no more YouTube shorts point. I did schedule a bunch of YouTube shorts, but I'm kind of wondering, because YouTube did slightly change one thing, I'm kind of wondering if they changed something else, and I didn't have the YouTube premieres button getting clicked. Maybe, maybe not. But yeah, there should be a slightly higher number of YouTube shorts getting announced and premiered. Yeah, and that's for the most part going to be first. Before I can make any more YouTube shorts and schedule them, I'm going to have to change the macro again, because I changed it to have in the file names the release dates so that games get released in a slightly different order. Things that are closer to the now get released and talked about, whereas things that are 30 days or later get pushed back and are less interesting and less important to emphasize. I almost want to say yes to Cyberblade Action Platformer, but I'm going to say no. No to this also. Space Viking is really fairly too silly as a concept. It's a good idea for a name, but then you're going to have to visually sell me on the idea of a Viking in space and how that could be funny and how that could be interesting, and a top-down game is not going to sell it to me. That's the kind of thing that you would kind of expect a story like that to happen in the old text-based games. A Leisure Suit Larry style game, or Zack McCracken, I guess, is a better example. Hazardous. Almost said yes to it, but then some of those screenshots really unsold me on the game. Mortal Beast. Great Flame. I think we'll say no to that. Chess Exerciser. No, not visually polished enough for a chess game. It's kind of shocking that there isn't a really good chess game that just sells all the time. But honestly, I just don't think chess is as popular as in video game format as people would like it to be, or I'd like it to be. We have another game called Sex Simulator Naughty Waitress, 3D CGI game. I assume because it's a simulator, you put characters in poses. Seems like you're in this bar. And so it's a lot of kind of unique positions and poses as you have people stretching across bar floors and on weird bar couches and bar counters. It kind of has that whole public idea. The game is $3.99. It's English only in the interface. Yeah, 3D CGI again. Nothing particularly special there. There is perhaps some weirdness in the idea of, hey, I want to make out or have sex in an area, but then the area is empty. I mean, is that really the fetish there? Like, maybe that's just a fetish I don't fully understand, as far as I want to do it in a obviously inappropriate place, but then I want to do it in such a way that nobody knows I did it. Which, yeah, seems a little weird. Like, if you're going to embrace that idea of flashing or voyeurism, or perhaps a reverse voyeurism might be a better way to describe it. Here we have a visual novel just coming out of early access, I guess. You would expect there to be just other people, though, for flashing / reverse voyeurism. No, it is a little surprising that there isn't some either joke game or adult game where you're just flashing / mooning characters. Here we have one of these RPG Maker style games, although it does look like it has quite a bit of art on it, and not a single screenshot here actually is RPG Maker looking. So yeah, it's a visual novel, not an RPG Maker game. I was wrong. $19.99, Japanese full audio, English and Chinese in interface and subtitles. Definitely comes off that was one of these games that could be slightly censored, and that there might be an uncensored patch somewhere here. A lot of characters there that they're highlighting, and the mature content does say partial nudity, and yet this is one that's not in the adult section, so that's an interesting thought, to say the least. So I'd assume this is probably a more censored version of what the original intended version may have been. Yep. Nothing to say here about that game. I think we may have already seen this game, so yep. We may be at the point now where we're looking at games that we have already looked at, but that's fine. We will be done fairly quickly if that is the case. Yeah, all of these are looking familiar. Again, I had to manually decide where to stop as far as opening more of these tabs, and I kind of just picked something. And so it's no surprise that it wasn't 100% accurate. But the good news is things should be 100% accurate, or close to 100% accurate going forward. Should be. Should is the operative term there. I do have to say though, it does feel like the quality of non-adult games has gone down severely in the past couple of days on Steam, which is not super surprising too. You're either going to have a AAA game that is coming out for Christmas, or you're going to shovel out garbage shovelware as soon as possible. That was kind of an adult game, but it's not worth talking about. It's not. Yeah, all these were old tabs. I really lucked out there, I have to say. You know, I thought that I was definitely on the path of a 3 hour and 30 minute, 4 hour stream. And no, I lucked out. Maybe it would have taken a few more minutes if we had done the follow list cleanup completely, but that's about the only thing that would have changed. Alright, well, that's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to support me further, there's a link down below. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.